The old laundromat on the corner of Willow and 3rd Street had always been a quiet place. A few locals came in and out, throwing their clothes into the humming machines, passing time scrolling through their phones or chatting in low voices. But lately something was different. A young girl, no older than 12 or 13, had been showing up every single night. Alone. At first, people barely noticed her. She slipped in unnoticed, always carrying the same small laundry bag, her oversized hoodie pulled up as if she were trying to disappear. She never asked for help, never spoke much, and never seemed to have an adult with her. She would load a single item into the washing machine, sit in the corner, and stare at the spinning drum as if hypnotized. And then, just before midnight, she would disappear into the cold darkness. People whispered. Some said she was homeless. Others thought maybe she was waiting for someone, but no one really knew. Then one evening, Sheriff Daniel Hayes walked in. He was just stopping by to grab a cup of coffee from the diner next door when he caught sight of her. Something about the way she sat, so still, so quiet, made his gut twist. He had been in law enforcement long enough to know when something wasn't right. He decided to watch. One night turned into 2, then 3. The girl kept coming, her routine never changing. It haunted him. Who was she? Where were her parents? And why was she always alone at this hour? Determined to find out, he finally approached her. "Hey there, sweetheart," he said gently, kneeling down to her level. "You okay? You waiting for someone?" The girl barely looked at him. She just nodded once, her fingers tightening around the sleeves of her hoodie. "Who are you waiting for?" he pressed. She hesitated, then in a barely audible voice whispered, "My mom." Sheriff Hayes frowned. It was past midnight. No mother would leave a child alone like this. Something was terribly wrong. He decided to run a check, digging into missing persons reports, child welfare cases, anything that might tell him who this girl was. What he found made his blood run cold. The next night, he returned to the laundromat, determined to get answers. But when he walked in and saw what the girl had been doing all along, the hardened sheriff, who had seen just about everything, felt tears burn his eyes. What he discovered that night would change everything. Sheriff Hayes stood frozen for a moment, his breath catching in his throat. The dim fluorescent light flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the laundromat floor. The girl sat exactly where she had the night before, curled up on the hard plastic chair, her small frame swallowed by the oversized hoodie. But this time, as he stepped closer, he noticed something he hadn't seen before. Her hands were trembling. Not the kind of nervous shake he'd seen when kids got caught sneaking out late. No, this was different. This was the kind of trembling that came from exhaustion, from fear, from something deeper. He lowered himself onto the chair next to her, careful not to startle her. "You said you're waiting for your mom," he said gently. "Where is she?" The girl didn't look at him. Instead, she kept her eyes locked on the dryer in front of her, watching the clothes tumble in slow circles. "She's coming," she mumbled. Sheriff Hayes studied her face, searching for clues. Her dark eyes were heavy with exhaustion, her lips dry and slightly cracked. Her hoodie was old, the sleeves frayed at the edges, and her sneakers had holes in them. He felt a familiar heaviness settle in his chest, the kind he felt when he knew a child was in trouble but wasn't ready to ask for help. "How long have you been coming here?" he asked. She shrugged. "A while." His jaw tightened. That wasn't an answer. Not really. He glanced at the laundromat attendant behind the counter, a tired-looking woman who had been watching their conversation from afar. When their eyes met, she gave a small nod, almost like she understood what he was trying to do. Hayes turned his attention back to the girl. "What's your name?" For the first time, she looked at him, just a brief glance, but long enough for him to see the hesitation in her eyes. "Maya," she said softly. "Maya," he repeated. "That's a beautiful name." She shrugged again, pulling her sleeves over her hands. Hayes exhaled slowly, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "Listen, Maya," he said. "I know something's going on. You don't have to tell me everything, but I want to make sure you're safe." Maya didn't answer. She just kept staring at the dryer, like it held some kind of secret only she could understand. The laundromat door chimed as a couple walked in, laughing softly as they carried in their laundry baskets. Hayes watched as Maya stiffened, shrinking in her seat like she was trying to disappear. Something wasn't right. he decided to take a different approach. "What's in the dryer?" he asked. Maya's fingers curled into the fabric of her hoodie. "Clothes," she said quickly. He smiled slightly. "I figured that much. But whose?" She hesitated before answering. "My mom's." Hayes felt a chill run through him. He had checked missing persons reports earlier that day, looking for anything that matched Maya's description. There was nothing. Not a single report of a missing girl fitting her age or appearance. That made things even more troubling, because if no one had reported her missing, it meant one of two things. Either no one realized she was gone, or no one cared. He watched as Maya's eyes flickered to the dryer again, her shoulders tense. "You said she's coming," he said carefully. "Does she know you're here?" Maya didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into the pocket of her hoodie and pulled out a single, crumpled dollar bill. She stood up and walked over to the vending machine in the corner, pressing the buttons with slow, deliberate movements. A bag of crackers dropped down, and she grabbed it quickly before returning to her seat. Hayes let her eat in silence for a moment, his mind racing. He had seen kids in tough situations before, runaways, kids who had lost their parents, kids caught in bad circumstances. But Maya was different. There was something about the way she carried herself, the way she spoke, that told him she wasn't just another lost child. She was waiting for something, or someone. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notebook, flipping it open. "Maya," he said, keeping his voice calm, "I know you said your mom is coming, but I need to ask, when was the last time you saw her?" Maya stopped chewing. Her fingers tightened around the bag of crackers, crinkling the plastic. Hayes felt his stomach drop. Before she could answer, the laundromat door chimed again. This time, it wasn't just another customer. It was a man, tall, unshaven, wearing a heavy jacket that looked like it hadn't been washed in months. His eyes swept the room, landing on Maya almost instantly. And just like that, the air in the laundromat changed. Maya went rigid. Her breathing quickened, and she clutched her bag as if she were about to run. Hayes followed her gaze, his own body tensing. He didn't know who this man was, but he knew one thing for sure. Maya was terrified of him. The man stood just inside the doorway, his eyes sweeping over the laundromat like he was looking for something, or someone. His shoulders were hunched, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his heavy jacket, and even though he wasn't doing anything outright threatening, there was something about him that put Hayes on edge. Maya wasn't just scared. She was frozen. Her breathing had turned shallow, and she gripped the edges of her hoodie so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Hayes didn't miss the way her body curled inward, like she was trying to make herself smaller, less noticeable. The man's gaze locked onto her. A slow, almost satisfied smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, and he took a step forward. Hayes stood up instantly, his body moving on instinct, stepping between Maya and the man before he even had time to think. His hand rested near his belt. Not on his gun. Not yet, but close enough to be a warning. "Evening," Hayes said, keeping his voice level. The man stopped. He blinked, as if noticing the sheriff for the first time, then forced a crooked smile. "Evening," he muttered. Hayes studied him. He was wiry, with a scruffy beard and tired eyes. There was a slight sway in the way he stood, like he hadn't slept much or maybe had a few drinks too many. His clothes were worn, the smell of old cigarette smoke clinging to him. "You looking for someone?" Hayes asked, keeping his tone casual, but his stance firm. The man shifted on his feet, his eyes flicking between Hayes and Maya. "Yeah, actually, that girl there, she's my niece." He nodded toward Maya, but she didn't react. She didn't move, didn't turn, didn't even breathe. Hayes didn't believe him. Not for a second. "That's so?" Hayes asked. "Funny. She didn't mention she was waiting for her uncle." The man's mouth twitched. "She probably just didn't want to talk to no strangers. You know how kids are." His smile was thin and forced. Hayes glanced down at Maya. She hadn't said a word, but the way she was gripping her bag, the way her shoulders trembled, everything about her screamed that she didn't want to go with this man. Hayes turned back to him, his expression hardening. "What's your name?" The man hesitated, just for a beat, before answering. "Kyle." "Kyle what?" "Just Kyle." Hayes nodded slowly. "Well, just Kyle, I'm going to need a little more than that before I let you take this girl anywhere." Kyle's jaw clenched. She's my family. I don't need permission to take her home. Hayes could feel the shift in the air. The laundromat had gone quiet. The few customers inside had stopped what they were doing, watching the exchange carefully. The attendant behind the counter looked nervous, glancing between Hayes and Kyle like she wasn't sure if she should step in or stay out of it. Maya still hadn't moved. Hayes kept his voice calm, but there was steel underneath it. If that's true, then you won't mind if I ask a few questions. Were her parents? Kyle's mouth twisted like he was trying to come up with the right answer. Her mom, she's not around right now. And her dad, well, he ain't in the picture. I'm all she's got. Hayes felt Maya flinch at those words. Something inside him tightened. He turned slightly, just enough so that Maya could see his face. Is that true? He asked her gently. Is he your uncle? Maya's hands clenched around the fabric of her hoodie. She didn't look up. She didn't speak. But the tiniest shake of her head was all Hayes needed. Kyle saw it too. His whole posture changed, his face darkening, his stance shifting like he was getting ready to argue. Maybe even fight. Hayes wasn't about to let that happen. You need to leave, Hayes said, his voice firm. Right now? Kyle scoffed. You got no right to keep me from my own kin. I got every right if this child doesn't want to go with you, Hayes said. And from where I'm standing, that looks pretty clear. Kyle took a step forward, his hands twitching at his sides. You think you can just... Hayes didn't let him finish. He reached for his radio, lifting it just enough for Kyle to see. I can call for backup, he said smoothly. We can have a real conversation down at the station if you'd like. Kyle froze. His jaw worked like he wanted to say something, but then his eyes flicked around the laundromat again, taking in the silent audience, the watchful stares. He knew he was outnumbered. Finally, with a muttered curse under his breath, he took a step back. Then another. You just made a mistake, Kyle said, his voice low. Hayes didn't react. He just stared Kyle down, waiting. After a few tense seconds, Kyle turned and walked out the door. The laundromat was silent for a long beat. No one moved. No one spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of the dryers, the steady tumbling of clothes in slow circles. Then, finally, Maya exhaled. It was shaky, almost like she had been holding her breath the entire time. Hayes turned to her. You okay? Maya nodded, but it wasn't convincing. He crouched down beside her, keeping his voice gentle. Maya, I need to know. Who was that man? Her fingers twisted together in her lap. For a long moment, he thought she wasn't going to answer. But then, finally, she whispered, I don't know. That single sentence made Hayes' stomach drop. He had a bad feeling before. But now he knew for sure Maya was in danger. And whoever Kyle really was, he wasn't done looking for her. Maya sat completely still, her small hands gripping the edge of her hoodie, her knuckles pale. The laundromat had gone back to its usual rhythm. Machines humming, people folding clothes, but there was a weight in the air now, something heavy that hadn't been there before. Hayes could feel it pressing down on both of them. He glanced toward the glass door, watching Kyle disappear into the night. The way he had left didn't sit right. It wasn't defeat. It was something else. A warning. A promise that he wasn't done. Hayes turned back to Maya. She still hadn't looked up. Hey, he said gently. You don't know him at all? She shook her head, just barely. You've never seen him before? Another shake. Hayes' chest tightened. Someone didn't just walk into a laundromat and claim a random kid as their niece unless they had a reason. And whatever that reason was, it wasn't good. He needed to get her somewhere safe. Maya, I need to ask you something else, he said carefully. You said you've been coming here for a while. Do you have somewhere to stay? She was quiet for so long, he wasn't sure she would answer. Then, so softly he almost missed it, she whispered, I was waiting for my mom. Something inside, Hayes ached at the way she said it. Like she had been saying those words to herself over and over, trying to believe them. He nodded. I understand. But is she coming back? Maya's fingers curled tighter around her sleeves. He let the silence stretch between them, giving her space to find the words. Finally, she whispered, she told me to wait here. She said she'd be back soon. Hayes felt a lump form in his throat. He had heard stories like this before. Parents who left and never came back. Kids who sat in the same spot for days, waiting, hoping, convincing themselves that they hadn't been abandoned. But there was always that moment. The slow, painful realization that the world had moved on without them. His voice softened. Maya, when did she say that? Her bottom lip trembled. A long time ago. Hayes inhaled sharply. He already knew the answer before he asked, but he had to be sure. Where were you staying? Maya hesitated. Then, after a long pause, she murmured, here. His heart sank. She had been sleeping here, in this laundromat, alone, night after night, waiting for a mother who wasn't coming back. The weight of it hit him all at once, the vending machine dinners, the exhaustion in her eyes, the way she clung to a routine that made her feel like she still had control over something. She had been surviving, barely, in the only place she knew. Hayes swallowed hard. He had to be careful now. If he pushed too hard, she might run. And if she ran, she'd be right back out there. Alone. And Kyle, whoever he was, would be waiting. He exhaled slowly, lowering his voice. Maya, listen to me. You don't have to stay here anymore. I can help. Her shoulders hunched. I don't need help. Hayes studied her, his gut twisting. I think you do. She shook her head quickly, her voice breaking. I just need my mom. Hayes felt helpless in a way he hadn't in a long time. He wanted to tell her the truth, that he didn't think her mother was coming back, that she deserved better than this, that she shouldn't have to carry this weight alone. But she wasn't ready to hear that. Not yet. Instead, he nodded. Okay, then let me keep you safe until she comes back. Just for tonight. Maya hesitated, her dark eyes flickering with uncertainty. Then, suddenly, the laundromat door chimed again. Hayes turned instinctively, his body already tense. But it wasn't Kyle. It was another man. Different, but just as unsettling. Broad shoulders, dark hoodie pulled up, hands shoved deep into his pockets. He moved with a purpose, his eyes scanning the laundromat quickly, like he was looking for something specific. Or someone. Hayes stiffened. Maya went completely still. She knew him. Hayes could see it in the way her body tensed, the way her fingers curled into the fabric of her hoodie, like she was trying to disappear. The man's gaze landed on them. His mouth pressed into a thin line. Hayes stood slowly, shifting his body just enough to block Maya from view. His pulse had kicked up a notch, his instincts screaming that this wasn't just a coincidence. First Kyle. Now this guy. Something was going on, and Maya was right in the middle of it. The man took a slow step forward. Then another. Hayes squared his shoulders. Can I help you? The man's expression didn't change. Looking for someone? Hayes nodded, keeping his voice neutral. Who? The man's eyes flicked past him, just for a second. Right to Maya. Hayes felt her grip the sleeve of his jacket, the smallest movement, like she was barely holding herself together. The man's lips curved into a cold smile. Kyle sent me? Hayes' stomach clenched. He knew it wasn't over. He had seen it in Kyle's eyes when he left, the promise of unfinished business. But now it was clear, Kyle wasn't working alone, and they weren't just looking for Maya. They were hunting her. Hayes felt every muscle in his body tense, his training kicking in. He shifted slightly, making sure Maya was completely behind him. Not sure what you think you're doing, he said evenly, but this girl isn't going anywhere with you. The man's smile didn't waver. You sure about that? Hayes didn't blink. Yeah, I'm sure. A long silence stretched between them. The air in the laundromat was thick with tension. The few customers left had gone silent, sensing something was wrong. The man tilted his head slightly, studying Hayes like he was trying to figure something out. Then, slowly, he stepped back. All right, he murmured. For now. He turned and walked out, disappearing into the night just as quickly as he had come. Hayes didn't relax. Not for a second, because this wasn't over. They would be back. And next time, they wouldn't just be watching. Hayes didn't move until the man was completely out of sight. Even then, his pulse remained steady, his instincts still on high alert. He had been in law enforcement long enough to know what had just happened wasn't a simple scare tactic. It was a message, a warning. Maya hadn't spoken a word. She was gripping his jacket sleeve so tightly that her small fingers trembled. He glanced down at her, his voice quiet but firm. We need to get out of here. She barely nodded. Hayes placed a protective hand on her shoulder and guided her toward the door, his eyes sweeping the parking lot before stepping outside. The cold night air hit them immediately, but it wasn't the chill that sent a shiver down his spine. It was the eerie stillness. Something wasn't right. His truck was parked a few spaces down, and for a split second, he debated the safest way to get her inside. But just as they stepped onto the sidewalk, he noticed a car parked near the laundromat entrance. It hadn't been there before. Dark, tinted windows, engine idling. Someone was watching. Hayes didn't break stride. He kept his pace steady, his hand firm on Maya's shoulder, but his mind was racing. Every instinct told him that if they ran, whoever was inside that car would react. He wasn't sure how, and he wasn't about to find out. He reached his truck, opened the door, and ushered Maya inside quickly. "Buckle up," he said, keeping his voice even. She fumbled with the seatbelt, her hands still shaking, but she got it on. Hayes slid into the driver's seat, his movements careful. He didn't turn on the engine immediately. Instead, he watched the car from the corner of his eye. Nothing. Then, slowly, the driver's side window of the mystery vehicle rolled down. Hayes gripped the steering wheel, his other hand resting near his sidearm. A man leaned out. Not Kyle. Someone else. Older. Calm. Calculating. He gave Hayes a slow, measured nod, like they were two men acknowledging something unspoken. Then, just as smoothly, the window rolled back up, and the car pulled away. Hayes exhaled, but the tension in his chest didn't ease. This wasn't random. This wasn't just Kyle acting alone. This was bigger. He turned to Maya. She was staring straight ahead, her breathing uneven, her body so tense it looked like she might shatter. Hayes started the truck. "We're going somewhere safe." She didn't answer. As he pulled onto the road, his mind worked through the possibilities. He had handled missing persons cases before, and he had dealt with people who had every reason to stay hidden. But something about this was different. This wasn't just about a runaway girl. It wasn't just about someone looking for her. It was about why. And whatever that reason was, it had just escalated. 15 minutes later, he pulled into the parking lot of the sheriff's station. It wasn't where he originally planned to take her, but things had changed. She needed protection, and until he figured out what was going on, this was the safest place she could be. Maya shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her eyes flicking up at the building. "I didn't do anything wrong," she whispered. Hayes turned off the engine and faced her. "I know, but I need to keep you safe. Just for tonight." She hesitated. Then, after a long moment, she gave a small nod. He led her inside, nodding at the deputy behind the desk. "Put her in interview room, too," he said. "And keep an eye on the cameras." The deputy raised an eyebrow, but didn't ask questions. Maya followed Hayes down the hallway, her steps small and hesitant. He opened the door to the interview room. It wasn't much, just a table and 2 chairs, but at least it was warm, and at least she wasn't alone. She sat down without a word. Hayes took a breath. "Maya, I need you to be honest with me." She stared at the table. He softened his tone. "I need to know the truth about your mom. About why she left." Maya's hands clenched in her lap. "I told you," she murmured. "She said she'd be back." Hayes leaned forward. "And did she say anything else?" Maya swallowed hard. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, she whispered, "She said not to trust anyone." A chill ran down Hayes' spine. Before he could ask more, a knock sounded on the door. He stood up, opening it just enough to see the deputy from earlier. The man's face was tense. "You need to see this," he muttered. Hayes glanced back at Maya. "Stay here." He followed the deputy down the hall to the front desk, where another officer was holding up a manila folder. "We ran a search on missing persons," he said, flipping it open. Hayes' breath caught. There, staring back at him, was a photo of Maya's mother. And next to it, her official status. Deceased. Hayes' blood ran cold. That wasn't possible. Because Maya had been waiting for her mother. And if her mother was dead, then someone else had told her to wait. Hayes stared at the file, his pulse thudding in his ears. Maya's mother wasn't missing. She was gone, officially declared deceased. But if that was true, who had told Maya to wait for her? Who had planted the idea in her head that her mother would come back? He swallowed hard, his mind racing through possibilities. Either the report was wrong, possible but unlikely, or someone had been using Maya's trust to keep her trapped in one place. And now, whoever they were, they wanted her back. He turned sharply on his heel and rushed back toward the interview room. His gut told him time was running out. But as soon as he reached the door, he knew something was wrong. The room was empty. Maya was gone. Panic flared in his chest. He scanned the hallway, the station too quiet. He yanked open the security office door. The deputy inside startled, but Hayes was already pushing past him, pulling up the surveillance feed. He found her instantly. Maya was in the lobby, standing completely still, and across from her, just inside the entrance, was the man from the car, the one who had watched them leave the laundromat. Hayes bolted. By the time he made it to the lobby, Maya was frozen in place, her small frame trembling. The man hadn't moved. He was waiting. Hayes stepped between them immediately, his stance protective. "Step back," he ordered. The man tilted his head, his expression eerily calm. "Relax, Sheriff," he said. "I just came for the girl." Hayes' jaw tightened. "She's not going anywhere with you." The man exhaled, almost like he was amused. "You don't understand, do you?" His eyes flicked toward Maya. "She's supposed to come with me. She knows that." Hayes felt Maya press against his back, as if trying to disappear behind him. He tightened his stance. "She's a child. She doesn't belong to you." The man's smile didn't waver. "No, but she doesn't belong to you either." Hayes' grip on his holster tightened. "Who are you?" The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled something from his pocket and held it out. A badge. Hayes barely hid his shock. "FBI." His mind scrambled to catch up. "This isn't your case, Sheriff," the man continued. "Maya is part of an active investigation." Hayes glanced at Maya, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. "Investigation into what?" he demanded. The man's expression darkened. "Into the people who took her mother's life." Hayes felt his breath catch. The man lowered his voice. Maya's mother wasn't just some woman who disappeared. She was in hiding. She was running from people who wanted her dead. He glanced down at Maya, and she made sure her daughter stayed invisible, too. Hayes' stomach turned. All this time, Maya hadn't just been abandoned. She had been hidden, taught to stay in one place, to wait, to survive. But whoever her mother had been running from, they had finally found her. And now, they wanted her daughter. Hayes turned back to the agent. "If she was in witness protection, why didn't you take her in earlier?" The man exhaled. "Because we didn't know she existed." Hayes stiffened. "She was never on record," the agent continued. "Her mother went off-grid before we could relocate her officially. We only found out about Maya when Kyle and his people started looking for her. Everything clicked into place. Kyle hadn't been some distant relative or stranger looking for a lost child. He had been hunting her. The men watching from the car, they weren't just lurking. They were waiting for the moment she was alone." Hayes' jaw clenched. "So what happens now?" The agent straightened. "She comes with us. We put her somewhere safe." Maya gripped Hayes' sleeve, her small fingers curling desperately into the fabric. He looked down at her, her big eyes pleading with him. She didn't trust the agent. And maybe she had a reason not to. Hayes turned back to the man. "And if she doesn't want to go?" The agent hesitated, then sighed. "Then she's at risk." Hayes' mind raced. Maya was smart. If she had survived this long, it meant she had learned who to trust and who to avoid. And right now, she wasn't moving. That meant something. Hayes squared his shoulders. "Then she stays with me." The agent blinked. "That's not." "It is," Hayes cut in. "At least until I know she's safe." A long silence stretched between them. Finally, the agent exhaled, nodding. "Fine. But if anything happens, you call me first." He pulled a card from his pocket and handed it over. "And keep her out of sight." Hayes took the card without a word. The agent gave Maya one last look, then turned and walked out the door. The moment he was gone, Maya sagged against Hayes, exhausted. He knelt down in front of her, his voice gentle. "You okay?" She hesitated, then shook her head. Hayes nodded, understanding. He reached for his radio and signaled his deputy. "Give me everything you can on Maya's mother. Every case file, every report." He glanced down at her. "We're not done yet." Because now, he wasn't just protecting her. He was going to find out the truth. Hayes drove through the quiet streets, his thoughts tangled in everything he had just learned. Maya sat beside him, her small frame pressed against the passenger seat, staring out the window in silence. She hadn't said a word since they left the station, but he could feel the weight of her exhaustion, the way her shoulders slumped, the way she clutched at the sleeves of her oversized jacket like it was the only thing keeping her together. The night stretched on as he pulled onto a back road, far from town, heading toward a small cabin he sometimes used when he needed space. It wasn't much, just a place in the woods with an old fireplace and creaky floors, but it was safe. And right now, that was the only thing that mattered. As they neared the cabin, he glanced at Maya. "You hungry?" She hesitated, then nodded. He took that as a small victory. "There's some food inside. It's not fancy, but I promise it's better than Laundromat vending machine snacks." A tiny, almost invisible smile flickered across her face, but it disappeared just as fast. Hayes parked and stepped out first, scanning the area. No cars. No movement. Just the sound of the wind rustling through the trees. Satisfied, he opened the passenger door. "Come on." Maya climbed out, her arms wrapped around herself, her steps cautious. Inside, Hayes flipped on the lights and locked the door behind them. He moved through the small space, gathering some blankets, lighting the fireplace, and setting out some food. Maya sat at the edge of the couch, barely touching her sandwich. He sat across from her, keeping his tone gentle. "You don't have to talk, but I need you to hear me. Okay?" She gave the smallest nod. "I don't know everything about what happened to your mom," he said carefully, "but I do know she loved you. I know she kept you safe as long as she could. And I know that the people looking for you aren't the kind you should trust." Maya swallowed hard but didn't speak. He leaned forward slightly. "But I also know you're not alone. Not anymore." Her lip trembled just a little, and she quickly turned her face away, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. Hayes let her sit with that for a moment before speaking again. "We're going to figure this out. Together." For the first time, she turned and looked at him, really looked at him. And in that moment, he saw it, the quiet, desperate hope she had been too afraid to believe in. The next few days were slow but steady. Hayes kept his promise, digging through every old case file, every report he could find about Maya's mother. The pieces started falling into place. She had been a key witness in a case against some powerful people who wanted to make sure she never spoke again. She had gone into hiding before the FBI could protect her, choosing to disappear on her own terms. And for a while, it had worked, but someone had found her. Hayes didn't tell Maya all the details. She didn't need to carry that weight. But what she did need to know was that her mother had fought for her, that every decision, every move had been to protect her. And now, it was his turn to do the same. The days stretched into weeks, and slowly Maya started to settle. She spoke more, even laughed a little. She asked questions about things that had nothing to do with fear, about the stars, about what his job was like, about whether he had ever gotten lost in the woods before. He let her be a kid again, even if just for a little while. But he also knew they couldn't hide forever. One evening, as they sat by the fire, he finally said it. "Maya, it's time." She stiffened. "For what?" "To stop running." Her fingers curled into the blanket around her. "But they'll find me." Hayes nodded. "Maybe, but this time, we'll be ready." She looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of doubt. She didn't find any. The next morning, Hayes made the call. The FBI agent returned, this time with a full team, ready to put Maya somewhere safe, somewhere new. She wouldn't be alone. She would have protection, a new life, a fresh start. When the time came to leave, she hesitated. Her small hand gripped Hayes' sleeve one last time. "You won't forget me, right?" He felt something tighten in his chest. He knelt down, meeting her gaze. "Never." She bit her lip, then after a moment, stepped back. The agent led her toward the waiting car, and just before she climbed inside, she turned and gave Hayes one last small wave. He returned it, standing there long after the car disappeared down the road. The case wasn't over. The people responsible for her mother's death were still out there, and Hayes wasn't done looking for them. But for now, Maya was safe, and that was enough.